Well, I guess if you're American, if you grew up in America and were educated in America, this sentence from the Declaration of Independence is very familiar and maybe so familiar that it's never, we don't actually think about it. If you're not American or you're not familiar with it, it doesn't matter. I mean, the point is to sort of look at it more closely, which we don't normally do, I think. But there's a lot of philosophical content in the Declaration of Independence, and in this very lines are packed with it. We hold these truths to be self evident. Now, that is to a philosophy teacher, which I am already, extremely interesting. The claim about self evidence, self evident truth in philosophy is usually regarded as one which needs no proof. It is self evident. That is, the idea is that there are certain claims, there are certain assertions or propositions, excuse me, which don't need to be proved to be seen to be true. They are self evident. The idea being that once you understand the words, once you actually understand what is being asserted, you also and automatically understand that it must be true. It is self evident. So, in the history of philosophy, it is a matter of great controversy. First of all, whether there are any self-evident truths, and then if they are, which ones they are. Usually, in philosophy, examples of self-evident truths are something like this. In logic, something like this: the same thing cannot both be and not be at the same time. The idea there is that such a basic metaphysical belief or truth about reality that you can't prove it. There'd be no way to prove it, but it's so deeply entrenched in our view of what reality is that we regard it as being immediately evident that it's true. That is, it's self evidently true. Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval philosopher, talking about ethics, he said this was true, that said this was the first principle of practical reason, of any sort of ethical view of the world. It's not coming up. Seems to be jammed here. I'll stop it for a moment. Well, what I'm trying to write is that the good is to be pursued and evil avoided. There it is. That is, this is the very first principle, the self evident truth. Thomas Aquinas says that's at the basis of all ethics, of all morals, of all practical action, in fact. So that's the philosophical background of self-evident truths. Self-evident truths are ones that are so obviously true and universally true. Right? They would be true for everyone. That they don't need proof, and that their truth is as obvious as the meaning of the claim. So it's quite a claim to say we hold these truths to be self-evident. And then to say, what is it exactly that the writer of this document is claiming to be a self-evident truth? Well, first, that all men are created equal. And let's just for the moment interpret that as meaning all human beings are created equal. Men, women, everybody. Now, is that a self-evident truth? That's what we need to ask ourselves, right? The second one, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. There's a lot in there. First of all, that it's a self-evident truth that there is a creator, that is some sort of God, that is responsible for the creation of human beings. Secondly, that this God endowed each one of these human beings with certain unalienable rights. There's a double claim there. The first is that we have rights. And I think we're talking about the kind of human rights that are elaborated in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen that we looked at last week. And secondly, that they are unalienable. That is, you cannot alienate them. You cannot give them away. You cannot renounce them. To alienate something from yourself is to give away or sell something of your own and make it someone else's, or to just to renounce it. Personal property is alienable. I can sell it, but there are certain things that I cannot sell, and those are my rights as a human being. So, a lot in that clause there that there is a God, and that this God endowed human beings with rights. Let's call them human rights, and that these human rights are unalienable. They cannot be given away, sold, renounced in any way, or taken away either. That among these are interesting. That is, there's no claim here for the list to be exhaustive, to say among these are, some of them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, no claim to have made any kind of exhaustive list of the unalienable rights of human beings, but obviously a list of what the writer of this document regarded as the most prominent ones. Life, we have a right to life, whatever that means. We have a right to liberty, to our own freedom. And then finally, the infamous pursuit of happiness. Now, what exactly that means, I think people fill that in for themselves. You cannot take my life. I have a right to my life. Now, is that a universal right? What if I'm attacking somebody and killed in self-defense? What if I'm a soldier in the war? What if I'm being punished for a crime? Would killing me in those situations be a violation of my right to life? I have a right to liberty, to freedom. Obviously, I can be incarcerated if I commit a crime. But so I think there's a recognition that there are exceptions to all of these rights. But the presumption is that we have a right to life, all things being equal. We have a right to liberty, all things being equal. And we have a right to pursue happiness. I always interpret, you can obviously need to interpret it, but I've always interpreted it as that we have the right to choose the kind of lives that we want to live. That is, we have the right to do, all things being equal, what we think we need to do in order to be happy. Of course, again, looking at the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, I have the right to pursue that happiness as long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else's right, is what is spelled out there. It's not really spelled out here. So just in this one sentence, what you get is the most famous sentence of the Declaration of Independence. There is quite a lot going on.